Hello and welcome to How Did You Get There, the podcast where it's all about the journey. It's about the twists and turns that got people to where they are right now. And today I have with me none other than Andy Bush, and he's a multi-hyphenate. And if you're wondering what does that mean, it just means he's got a lot of jobs. He is he is an author, an illustrator, a radio presenter, a voiceover artist, a podcaster. But with all of that, he's also a family man, a dad to three lovely girls, and he's a loving partner, I would hope. So he's an all-rounder.
Thank you very much. Can I put that on my LinkedIn profile? I really appreciate that.
What have I missed? Have I missed any of your jobs?
No, that's it. I'm a busy man, but yes, that pretty much sums it up. And a father to three lovely girls who definitely keep me on my toes. That's for sure.
You know what? I have two boys, and I've been told having boys is perhaps a little bit difficult, but having teenage girls, that's the ultimate test.
Yeah. One of mine now, my eldest is 14, and already that's just like there's no book, there's no handbook, is there, for that kind of
thing? I wish somebody had given me a handbook, because I think one of my I say this all the time, but one of my greatest fears is that I'll mess up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to mess up where it comes to raising humans, do you?
No, absolutely, and it's scary because you've got to kind of learn as things go, and things are ever changing. Like I guess my eldest daughter Erin has to deal with social media and Instagram.
Yes.
And when I was at school about 300 years ago, when you went home after school, that was it. You had no connection with your friends until you went back to school the next day. But it's persistent conversation now, particularly with girls and groups of friends, and friends being ostracized from groups or put into
yes.
It's incredibly complicated. It really is.
And I think not only that, you have this wide group, and some of these people are not even connected to you. They're connected to people you know, and you're always being judged. And there's so much of your life that's out there. I don't know how they do it, and I am not envious. I'm happy I grew up when I did. So, of all of the jobs that you have, which is your favorite?
I love my time in Bristol as the on the breakfast show back in the day in GWR Bristol. But I absolutely love now. We do the home time show, we do drive time. It's a great time of the day because you get that kind of buzz of people excited about going home and starting their evenings and stuff like that as well. And also, breakfast show hours are incredibly brutal. So we used to get up at 4:30 to come in and all that stuff. So
I am not a morning person.
No, me neither. And I did it for 10 years. And it just really, it takes I think breakfast radio takes a big chunk out of you as a partner as well. Like, you can't remember stuff because it's, you almost have two different personalities, your morning personality and your in the rest of the day personality. So I feel like you give up a lot of your life when you do breakfast. But then again, now I get home at 8:30, 8:45. So I guess I do miss the bedtime story bit as well. So you always kind of miss something, I guess, in each of those day parts.
Yeah. But is there something, though, that you're most passionate about? Because you do your drawing as well. I've seen some of them, or you call it doodling.
Yeah.
And you do the radio thing, you do the voiceover piece as well. Is there anything that you're most passionate about out of all of those things?
Definitely radio. I love being able to go into work each day and then sensing the way the world is, and then trying to come up with something that will connect with the audience. Like, what do we want to do today? Mm-hmm. Where do we want to take the show today? And I love theatre of the mind, trying to get people to see in their mind what you're thinking of in your mind, and whether that's serious or stupid or something. And just being, I think one thing that really reinforced the bond between, radio and its listeners was lockdown. A lot of people kind of got through lockdown with us, really, and it only strengthened the bond that we got between us and our listeners. And there was a thing a few years ago about Spotify's here, how long has radio got left?
That was one of my questions, because there has been a massive debate about whether we're going to see the death of radio. Not only is there Spotify, but a lot of people are turning to the web.
Yeah.
Right? They can consume what they want when they want, in their own time. Whereas radio almost relies on you being there in the moment and making the time in your day. Do you ever worry that one day you'll be out of a job and radio will be no more?
I worry a lot about being out of a job. I'm always one comment or the microphone's accidentally being up away from being out of the job. But that's an ever-present danger. It is, on that level, actually, it's one of the hazards of the job, in that in our society now, you can say the wrong thing or Tweet the wrong.
Absolutely.
I'm one tweet or one comment away from
Hmm.
being, and I do kind of go close to the edge. That's the kind of radio presenter I am. But you do live and die by that. So and it's going to happen at some point, I'm sure. But going back to what you were saying before about Spotify, I don't know. I mean, I think people, if you're given the chance to pick your own songs, it's still a slightly disengaging experience. There's something about connecting with that voice and that something listening to something that other people are interacting with at the same time. It's a little bit why people had those listening parties during lockdown where you
Yes.
would play. I did that with quite a few of my friends where we played an album at the same time and then in our WhatsApp group talking about each of the songs in order. And there's something about the communal shared experience of doing that and knowing that other people are listening to the same thing as you at the same time. And I think that's today's
Yeah.
radio, really.
I miss that. And do you think that's the difference between radio almost and podcasting? Because I miss knowing that there's something on
Yeah,
television and that my friends and I would be watching it at the exact same time. And then if I missed it, I'd have to,
yeah,
almost wait on it. And it's almost as though you had that experience together. Whereas now I'll find that because you get everything, you get about 12 episodes of
yeah.
something, you can binge watch. I'm almost scared to speak about it because then I'm going to be at a different
Yeah,
point. I'm going to spoil something for someone.
yeah, because you get the like the I always call them the spoiler police who
Oh, yeah.
haven't caught up with the program yet, and then I mean, we get that a lot actually, where people will go crazy if you've talked about a program because it's like it's been out for 3 weeks. The onus is on you to avoid listening to stuff if you're worried about getting the ending ruined for you and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I mean that element. That's why I think Saturday night TV is still such a big family thing because it's something that people sit and watch and will tweet about, and you can see what other people's reactions are to it at the same time. And I guess you kind of have a bit of that with radio, where that other people, whether they're in their vans on the way home from work, getting the kids' teas ready, that kind of stuff, everyone's consuming it all at the same time. And it's a communal shared experience, which is what elevates it above just simply listening to a playlist.
Yeah. And then you spoke about cancel culture,
Mm.
really, because that is what it is. And you find that comedians are very careful about the jokes that they tell because they don't want to offend. And that is an occupational hazard for you, saying the wrong thing, tweeting the wrong thing. But I feel as though, while on one hand, I think it is great that we've got this social awareness,
Mm.
there is something about almost, it feels like censorship in a
Yeah.
sense. It feels as though there is something that is preventing people from being their authentic selves and their creative selves. So what is that middle ground between what should be okay on air and what should not be okay? Things that we should just not speak about. Do you think we're still in that space where we can have honest conversations and really share our perspectives?
I'm not so sure. I mean, I feel like I've been doing this now for like probably 20 years, I think. And I have kind of an inbuilt thing where I just know where the line is. And it's quite hard to define what the
Mm-hmm.
line is. And I think a big part of being able to have a sense of the line is, when you've been in a job for a while and your audience knows you, that's where they trust you and they know that you're making a certain point, coming from a certain perspective. I think where you run into trouble is where what you've said is taken out of context. So that's why Twitter is like an absolute,
Oh, I avoid
yeah,
Twitter.
yeah. It's
I'm a little bit scared.
I'm scared. It can be like a real viper's den, really, because you can have something you've said taken out of context. And what's also fascinating is that something that was fine 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is now not okay.
Mm,
And so
it just doesn't age well.
it doesn't. So people can pull up stuff that
Mm.
you've mentioned 5 years ago, and now it looks horrendous. But it kind of shows it shows how far we've come. But you watch something like The Big Bang Theory. You watch that TV show, and some of the jokes about them trying to get with girls now, it looks really. It comes across really. It makes it really uncomfortable to watch, and it's like seemingly innocent show. Even Joey and Chandler's antics in Friends. That whole approach to the objectification of women and so on is, rightly so, is completely changed these days. And it makes a show that no one's had Friends down as being controversial or being edgy or being crossing the line, but it shows how even just the passage of time over 5-10 years, 15 years can make something that was absolutely fine now seem really inappropriate. So you've got the kind of shifting sands of time working against you a little bit as well. But as to can we have is there a safe middle ground to have conversations? I don't know. I always think you're always at the risk of someone taking things the wrong way. But I don't let it. The big issue you can have, I think, with radio is to start to try and second guess how the audience are going to take it, because you always have to talk from your own heart and how you feel and trust in that. Otherwise, if you start picking into it, you'll pull apart your ability to form a coherent argument or talk about anything.
Yeah, but I think this podcast is also about growth. And for me, if I think about the person that I was, oh my gosh, even 5 years ago, that is not the person that I am now. If I think about the person that I was 10 years ago when I was, I don't want to give my age, but yeah, as just about 30. But I'm a totally different person. We, I think, need to allow people to evolve, people to grow, absolutely hold them accountable. But I just think it feels a little bit iffy for me, because cancel culture just means that we don't give people the space to make mistakes. And mistakes for me is a part of that learning and the part of me evolving, because it's only a mistake if I don't learn from it.
100%. Well, you're absolutely right. And that's unfortunately what happens is that people will get set upon by someone, let's just say social media, for example. A lot of the times when anyone's ever said anything bad on radio or it's been controversial, 99% of the people who are complaining and doing the pile on about it never heard the actual broadcast anyway. So it's like it's signaled up on Twitter that this person is like the next target, and you get this kind of pile on. And people should be, like you say, given the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and move on. And otherwise, you're not helping people see the light of the error in their ways and in any way improve themselves. So yeah, I think cancel culture is horrendous. And I hope that we're just starting to, it's balancing out a little bit, and hopefully we're just starting to move out of that grim time,
So Andy, the podcast is called How Did You Get There? And I look at you and I see someone who is very experienced, very self-assured. You've obviously been doing this for a long time. It almost feels like it's a muscle for you. You're like, you get a camera, you get a mic, you're there, you're ready. Absolute Radio is actually an interesting part of my story. So I speak about it on the podcast, right? Came to the UK, tried to find a job, could not get a job, Andy. Right. Tesco didn't even want me. They were like, no, not you. And I remember applying for a job. I think it might have been on Twitter, I'd like to say it was on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
Don't ask how. And I ended up speaking to Kat.
Oh, yes.
You might know Kat McDonald and Andrew. And that is how I got my first kind of real job, I'd like to say, in the UK. But before that, I had a lot of other jobs. When I went to One Golden Square, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this might be it. Finally, something's going to happen. I'm radio adjacent, because at that point in my mind, I was going to work on British radio.
It's good to have a goal.
Didn't happen, but I have a mic. Your journey hasn't been that straightforward, I imagine, because breaking into any form of the kind of creative industry, entertainment, and making a name for yourself would have been really difficult. You must have done other jobs before this, and I have a list.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
So you can't say you didn't do any other jobs. What was your journey like? How did you get to this point in your career?
So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm always kind of really thankful for what I do, because I've done a lot of kitchen jobs. I've worked in a lot of kitchens in catering. So I grew up in Devon. So I've done a lot of bar work, and so I don't consider what I do now to be like a proper job, because there's people who do real work, like proper tiring long hours.
Yes.
I don't consider this to be like a real job, really. Although I guess people who do jobs like, say, bar or catering or stuff like that, I guess at the end of the day you can just forget about it. Whereas the thing that is the deal with the devil with radio is that you're always worrying about what people think if your next show is going to be your last, and what you talk about on the next show. So that's the kind of deal with the devil that you have. But for me, I was in a band, so we moved to Bristol to get into the music industry, and I was selling working the phones at a call centre, basically, phoning people up when they're having their tea and just really getting on their nerves because they just want to have their dinner. And
that is quite annoying, Andy.
It is. I apologise. I want to take this opportunity to apologise to everyone whose tea I interrupted during that period. But I took a walk in the daytime in my lunch break, and there was a careers fair in Clifton in Bristol, and I just had to wander around. Had no interest in radio at all up until that point. And they were advertising for travel news presenters. So I didn't drive, so I just made it up, recorded it on a cassette tape. How long ago this was? Recorded a demo on a cassette tape, made it all up, sent it in, and they ended up giving me an interview, and I got the job on a travel news for a travel news company. And the good thing about travel news is that I got to go on loads of different people's shows. So you would dial into a show, do the traffic news, dial back out again, dial into
That's good exposure.
good exposure. And I think as well for me, I really learned. I think one of the biggest things in radio when you're working with other people is to stay on the track of how they want this particular piece to go. So some people will just say whatever they want, talk about whatever they want to talk about, and derail things a little bit. So I kind of learned, the time sensitive thing of being a reactor to someone who's got a particular thing, because a lot of the times they talk to you about what they were doing in the show, and then you'd have a take on it, or you'd chip in and help out and that kind of thing. So I learned under pressure, I guess, how to deal with other presenters that I didn't necessarily have a rapport with. I could kind of react and live on air, which is a bit of a skill, because some people kind of when the red mic light is live, some people kind of it can be quite intimidating, but repetition of anything gets you over the hump when it comes to being scared. So, and then that they liked what I was doing there. I ended up forming a bit of a bond with another guy that was doing a weekend show. We did a couple of demos, and it kind of went from there, really. Our demo initially got chucked out. I didn't want to do anything with it, and then an Australian consultant heard it and said, give these guys a shot at the weekend. We did weekends, and we moved to drive time in Bristol, got the breakfast show for 10 years, and then I got poached by Absolute Radio, and we moved over to London. So it's kind of been like that. But given how many different radio stations people normally work for, I've been a very, very, very faithful. I've only had two loves in my life. One is PWR Bristol, and the other has been Absolute Radio and Bauer. I've only ever really done work for those two companies.
Your journey is really interesting because you took advantage of an opportunity, didn't have a car, so you faked it almost until you made it.
Yeah, I faked it. I faked it even when I was doing it. So because I didn't drive, so I didn't really know what I was talking about. But what I would do is just kind of like listen to how other people were doing the bulletins and kind of go, all right, kind of sounds like this. And you can kind of guarantee that most of it's going to be fairly busy at these times. So you could kind of hedge your bets, really. So, I do want to apologise to the people of Gloucester, because 95% of the traffic news I was giving them during that period was entirely made up.
Oh, my days. And then you now work with Richie.
Yes.
Isn't it? What about that dynamic? How do you get to a point where you mold something? Is it a friendship that's on air and off air as well? Is it a working relationship? How do you mold that so that you have that dynamic on air that engages listeners and makes them really want to tune in and hear what you two have to say?
Well, it's tricky because I was part of a 3-person breakfast show in Bristol for 10 years, and it's hard. It's like being in a band in that you're doing a lot of gigs. You're working a lot together, and you're working together at a very sensitive time. It's pressure, so you can get on each other's nerves. So many breakfast shows and so many shows, the people end up hating each other in the end because they're sick of each other, and then you grow. There's a kind of like people get a bit kind of bitchy with each other because you feel like the other one's getting more of the limelight and all that kind of thing. So when I left that breakfast show, I did a show on my own on Absolute Radio for about 4 years, and I was like, this is great. I don't have to talk to anyone about what I want to do today. I can just go and do it. I don't have to convince someone, let's do this, which is part of the kind of the machinery of the democracy of a radio show is exhausting, to be honest with you. Because you like take turns doing stuff or trying to convince somebody that this is a good idea, or maybe bury your idea because you don't want to be too dominant because you've had a couple of your ideas that have ended up going to air. So let's let them do their idea. And it's like, it can be quite exhausting. But when Jeff Lloyd left the hometime show, left the drive time show on Absolute Radio, our boss Paul asked, if I first of all said, look, I'd love to do this. This was the natural progression for me. And I guess this is the thing that kind of ticks over in the story of my career, is that I've always put myself forward. So if ever there's been a gap or an opportunity, I've always thrown my hat down to, I would love to do this. Just so you know, I would love to do this and make this a great thing. So, and that's been a constant all the way through my career. But Paul then said, well, I wouldn't want it to be just a solo show. So what about working with
Mm-hmm.
Richie? And obviously the Christian O'Connell Breakfast Show was coming to an end at that point. So Richie and I were, I mean, I've known Richie for 20 years really through radio. So we've known each other, but we've not worked closely together. When we were kind of
Yeah.
consciously coupled by our boss, Paul. And
Not consciously
yeah,
coupled.
consciously coupled by Paul. He was the maker. And we worked, we worked really well together. I think we've been in this industry long enough to know what works. I think we've both been in slightly combustible, crazy breakfast shows. So we know, like, I don't want to go down that route again. And we've both seen how
Mm-hmm.
things can get a little bit kind of bit stressful. So I don't know. I feel like we give each other space. We share the workload, and we work well with each other. Or, we can workshop each other's ideas, which we do a lot before the show. So it's a really good working relationship. And we're friends off air and on air as well.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to have relationships in the workplace that move beyond the workplace and become something more, because you spend a lot of time with the people that you work with. So ideally, you want these to be people that you actually like, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the things that you said that I wanted us to delve deeper into, though, you said that if ever an opportunity came up, you said yes. Were you never afraid of failing, bombing, getting it wrong, losing your spot?
Well, no, I mean, I am. I've always been. I was incredibly shy growing up. Like I didn't want to do.
You were
I was
shy.
shy. Me, what? Little old moi. But I was terrified of doing languages at school because I didn't want to talk in front of people. Um, I was a proper shy kid. Really didn't want to, like, the idea of hell for me was like talking in class or on stage or doing anything that would put the attention onto me. So I think if I was to go back and speak to my 12-year-old, 10-year-old self, who clearly was having panic attacks back in that era, which is obviously, people only talk about it now, and you look back and you think, I was definitely having like major anxiety. To think that I am now doing this job, I guess my 10-year-old self wouldn't believe it. So, but I do. It's weird. I'm not like super self-confident, but I do have an unerring faith in my own ability to. I do back myself. If I put my mind to it, I can do it. And one thing that's been great about being at Absolute Radio is that since I got here, I joined in 2012, which was during the London Olympics, and within a week I was on stage like introducing like Coldplay. Oh no, and like not Coldplay. Sorry, I introduced like Blur on stage and Duran Duran, and they just threw me. Absolute Radio threw me into loads and loads of situations where my initial reaction was like, "Oh my god, I don't know if I can do this." And like I said earlier on, I think you've got to constantly put your hand up and do it and test yourself all the time, because it's a bit like if you've got a fear of flying, if you refuse to get on a plane or you allow it to beat you, then I think it'll own you. That fear will then own you and stay with you. And I'm all about trying to make sure that doubter, the self-doubt, which everybody's got in their brain, even the people who are at the very top of the tree, have got exactly the same thing in their brains. Everyone's got that kind of self-doubt, and I'm all about not allowing that to, you know, become more of a thing and own me a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's quite inspirational. Andy, you spoke about 10-year-old you, and I think when I was looking into this, I just made the assumption that 10-year-old Andy would be the center of attention, doodling somewhere, perhaps doing performing
Yeah.
arts, the life of the party, just Mr. Personality. But you've touched on not necessarily having the self-confidence. What would you say to your 10-year-old self? And how do you encourage, other children who might have been like you and are struggling with coming into themselves or even knowing who they are or understanding what their identity is?
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier on about, there's that battle of not allowing the doubts, the critic in your brain
Mm-hmm.
to have the upper hand. I have a weird relationship with my own like mind in that the thing that allows me to do the job that I do, and as I have been in the industry for as long as I have and done what I've done, is that I guess I've got an odd brain, so I can see things in a slightly different way to most people. Now that's a bit of I see that as a superpower, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it's always come with the byproduct of that, the yin and yang of that, is that makes you prone to anxiety or to be a warrior. And I am like a warrior and a panicker about stuff and everything. But I think when I was a kid, it was like, oh my God, I'm going to have social anxiety for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? And I was absolutely petrified of everything. Any social awkward situation, I was just, really, really, I don't know, really affected me. And I would just, I would say to anyone who has a bit of social anxiety or awkwardness and thinks that, it's going to blight them for the rest of their lives, it can actually, a lot of the times, it just means that you're hyper aware and you actually have a kind of foresight that a lot of people, as you get later on in life, would absolutely kill to have that kind of insight and the way to see life differently. I just think when you have that state of awareness where you're seeing things at a different level, and without sounding like I'm not bigging myself up, but with my job, I can look at a situation in a day and have a completely different take on it than, say, 9 out of 10 other people would do. And that's why I've kind of, through the Darwinist way of like whittling down the amount of radio presenters that are still doing this job that I started with, that's just one of those things that you have, it's innate in you. But I think the byproduct of that, the side effect of that, is that your brain is also supercharged, so it will be incredibly vivid ideas of why that presentation is going to be terrifying, and everyone's going to laugh at you because you've got a vivid imagination, and that works for good and bad, I think.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. And I think there's something about us being in a space where now neurodiversity and diversity of thought is such a big topic, because before everybody was expected to be neurotypical and think in the same way.
Yeah.
And almost you were expected to fit in and not necessarily stand out. You wanted to be part of that status quo. What we're seeing now is that diversity of thought is making the creative industry so beautiful, because doing things differently is absolutely being celebrated. I like your the way you've put it, though, in terms of that being your superpower. What other superpowers do you have, Andy?
Other superpowers. I think I'm definitely like, I'm not. I'm quite like thick when it comes to like logic. I don't have any common sense.
Not have common sense. My mother always said to me, you know what? Of all the senses, the one that people don't have is common sense. So she's always saying you need to have common sense. How does one not have common sense?
It's just not there. It's just not there. I feel like if this was like, the 1500s, I probably would have been dead at 15. I'd have fallen.
Oh, no.
Something. No, I don't have any common sense, but I think I have emotional
intelligence. I love that.
Thing, but I'm very good at, you see, this is the other thing about, growing up being shy and not being like one of the cooler kids, because I wasn't one of the cooler kids at all, but I got on with everybody. So I've always in my life, whatever I've done, any line of work, I'm interested in people and what people say about stuff and people's stories. And I grew up. My family are all from Liverpool, and I've had some amazing aunties and uncles, storytellers. So we used to sit there and listen to them tell funny stories about stuff that they've done. But anything I've ever done in my life, I've always sat there and wanted to hear about. A little bit like like what you do. You want to hear people's tales and their experiences. And I've always been good at speaking to people and putting people at ease a little bit. And I think with interviewing and doing a job like this, the ability to make quite a quick connection, I feel like I can read people quite quickly, and then I know what approach works best with them. If that doesn't sound too sinister, I think I can just kind of mold what I do to that person. Because a lot of the times I think people who come across as being rude, particularly like music industry or film industry, or actors and actresses, that kind of thing, they're just nervous. I think they're just a bit scared of the situation and don't want to be shown up. And I think when you view people's behavior like that and through that prism, I think it changes the way that you kind of maybe you can be a bit more softer in your approach to them and get a little bit more out of them.
I like that. And I think what I've just recognized as well, because I was looking at everything you do, the common thread for you is that you're actually a storyteller. You like telling stories. So when you're doing your doodling, you're taking an image, and beyond that, there's just so much that you're saying.
Yeah.
And what I always find fascinating is somebody reading a novel or, looking at a piece of art, and they have that latitude to interpret it in the way that they want to. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes not even remotely connected to what the author or the artist intended.
Yeah.
But you've got that freedom, don't you? And that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And and for me now, I mean, I guess if you're a plasterer and you go back round to a house that you did the walls for, you might think, oh, that's lovely. But for me, it's like someone in town stopping me and saying, oh, that bit about talking about the dog running off down the street that you said on the show, that really struck a chord with me because that happened to me when I was a kid. So for me, my handiwork that I would then get kind of get a good feeling about later on down the line would be people recounting that I've given them, I've had emotional connection with them. That for me is what I'm aiming for and what I get kind of a sense of gratification out of.
You also said that when you're interviewing, you're quickly able to read people, which is an interesting skill. So you're interviewing me now. I've come in, I've had a really bad day because the kids are just so annoying and my husband's just doing my head in. How do you make a connection?
Well, what I do, I always try and distract people. I think sometimes something even slightly disarming about, oh, would you like a cup of tea, or how's your day been? Because a lot of these people.
Oh, I hate tea, Andy. I hate tea. That's not going to work with me.
Damn it.
You've ruined it.
What do you drink then? If you don't drink tea, what do you have?
So, I have hot chocolate with alternative milk. So if you put milk in, you've just ruined my entire day. But I have a hot chocolate or I'll have a peppermint tea.
What alternative milk are you putting in hot chocolate, if you don't mind me asking?
It could be soya milk. It could be, as long as there's no lactose, because then
big trouble.
For everybody.
There you go. I put you at ease by talking about IBS or whatever the situation might be.
I don't even know that I have IBS because it's something that just came out of nowhere. Anyways, TMI.
Definitely doesn't have IBS. Just a joke. It's a hypothetical situation.
So, Andy, you were meant to be a rock star in another life. This shy, retiring kid could have been a rock star. How? Why? Why did you not go in that direction?
Well,
I could be speaking to Andy, the rock star, right now. That is fascinating.
Well, I mean, it was a real sliding doors moment. So the Bristol music scene when I was there was really vibrant. There was a lot of bands getting signed, and we were playing up and down the country. I was in a band called Ivory Springer, and we still got our stuff on Spotify and everything. I'm very proud of. We did a couple of albums, and they were really proud of them. And yeah, we had people coming to sit in our band rehearsals from record companies with a view.
Oh wow!
But at the same time, we got the breakfast show in Bristol, so I couldn't be doing a gig in Leeds till 2:00 in the morning and getting back and being on air at 5, and such a tiny amount of people really make it with music. It's really it's like trying to put all your.
People could say the same about radio as well, though, because you might work on a community radio station, but not everybody is on a national radio station that's heard anywhere in the UK.
Yeah.
So how do you choose? Because it feels almost, and a lot of people have this, right, where you're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And making decision A brings you in this direction, and making decision B brings you in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
Was it what drove you to make the decision you did to go with radio as opposed to going the rockstar route?
I guess it's just the odds. I just knew that we had a good chance of getting signed in when we were in Bristol in a band, but it wasn't a sure thing. Whereas I was being given the opportunity to take over a huge breakfast show in Bristol and go that route, and it would open up all these other doors. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was really sad, to play the final gig with the band, and then that's it. I haven't played any live music since then, all those years ago. So that was very, because it was a big part. We used to rehearse twice a week and be playing up and down the country. So it was very weird to suddenly not have music like that in my life anymore. But I'm definitely, I feel like I made the right decision for sure. And I'm proud of what we did in that era, but I definitely made the right decision. And it's so weird because one of the first bands I interviewed when I started Absolute Radio was Muse, and we supported Muse a couple of times when they were just
wow.
Well, so they stayed and didn't want to do anything else and just focused on the music, whereas we just kind of, I don't know, you have to have, I guess it's a little bit like getting into radio. You've got to be completely single-minded on getting to your goal at all costs, but also being willing to call it if it's not going to work out, and then don't beat yourself up about it as well, because it's really difficult, really, really difficult.
Well, I'm sorry to say, Andy, that was logic and common sense.
Oh my God, I might have common sense after all.
You might have common sense all this time you were thinking. So, when I was at Absolute Radio as well, I remember Mumford and Sons were coming. I know nothing about Mumford and Sons. If I met a British celebrity right now, they would probably say, how irreverent, because I literally know nobody. So I'm there, these guys, they've got long hair, and I'm like, oh, who are these people?
Yeah.
And then the songs used to be played every single day on radio. I will wait for you. Like I heard it every day. So I know that song is not something that would normally be in my repertoire.
Yeah.
Because I'm a dance hall, R&B, hip hop kind of girl.
Right. Okay. Cool.
But what's your genre of music?
I kind of like the music that we were playing back in the day in the band. So like kind of more kind of punky, Britpop and indie and guitar music, that kind of thing. I love the Charlatans and Blur and Shellac and Big Black and the Jesus and Mary Chain and Jesus Lizard and stuff like that. So I kind of like heavy guitar music, I would say.
Okay, so you kind of lost me. You started calling everybody, and I was like. However, if you wanted me to become a new enthusiast for the genre of music that you like, what would be that one song that you would recommend that you think spans anybody who listened to that song would absolutely say, you know what, I'm a convert, this is it?
I would say the new album by John Squire and Liam Gallagher. Obviously, John Squire from the Stone Roses, Liam Gallagher from Oasis.
I actually know who Liam Gallagher is, so you've won there.
There you go, won. So, yeah, I would try that album. I think it's fantastic. It's one of the best albums, as collaboration, but one of the best albums I've heard in 5 or 10 years. So I just think it's a great gateway back in to say, looking through Oasis's back catalogue, and the same for the Stone Roses.
I'll need to write it down, and I'm going to have a listen, and I'll let you know what I think.
Great, that'll be brilliant. I like it.
Do you still play guitar then?
I do. I play like blues guitar. I try and learn like Delta blues and stuff like that. So I don't play bass guitar anymore, which is what I played in a band. But
I love bass guitar though. I feel as though bass guitar is what gives you that rhythm, like.
It's good.
I always do air guitar. In my mind, I should be able to play the guitar.
Yeah, air guitar is 70% of actual guitar play. So you're nearly there.
Oh man! So you know what? Probably I'm a rock star. Did you do any singing at all, or were you a musician?
Yeah. Just my voice is really terrible singing voice. So glad I didn't.
I don't buy it, Andy. You work on radio. In order to work on radio, you have to have some kind of mastery of the tones and the sound. You've got to know how to work that voice. I don't believe you. You can sing.
Well, I tell you what, I'll record you a bit of me singing. I'll send that over to you. I guarantee within. Andy, you're right. I shouldn't have doubted it.
You know what? I'm scared now. I'm scared. I want to talk to you about humility because I have messaged a lot of people to come on this podcast. You would be surprised. And I have no shame when it comes to me wanting to do certain things, right? Yeah. I will email anybody. And when I messaged you, what really struck me was how quickly and you responded, firstly, how open you were to coming on a podcast that is perhaps... It's not a known podcast. It's not a podcast that people are talking about. It's not viral on the internet. How do you maintain that humility and accessibility and openness to supporting podcasts like these or ventures that are unknown when you're at this stage in your career?
Well, I mean, I've been there, and I know what it's like when you're just trying to get in and get started and stuff like that as well. And I had the same experience as you. I wrote lots of letters to people and sent lots of emails, and a lot of people don't even reply and all that. And I've always promised myself that I'll never be like that. I'll always try and be as helpful as I possibly can to people and do whatever I can. And it's a real honour to be asked as well. So no, I always try and be as I feel like through my career I've always been try to be good to people, nice to people, because I don't know. I've worked with a lot of people who are not very nice to people, and I just don't know how they go home and sleep at night knowing that they've made someone's life a misery or tried to close doors to someone. And I would say the further up the tree you get, like I am at the moment, the more people just try and shut other people down because they want to try and protect their own position, unfortunately. And that's why I always say to, if you're doing like a school talk or speaking to people who are trying to get into the industry, it's like, don't take the rejections as you being not good enough. It's basically, there's a lot of people who are panicked about their own position, who don't actually have the self-belief that they purport to have, and they're just trying to circle the wagons and keep themselves in a position that they've kind of clung on to, really.
Yeah, well, I just want to say to you publicly, thank you, because that is such a massive indicator of your character and the human being that you are.
Oh, thank you.
Because it's massive and it means so much, and I'll always value this conversation that you've taken the time to have with me. And the other thing that I would say is, I do a lot of I do a lot of work in the DEI space at work. And I remember a gentleman saying something. It was for young Black people in insurance, and they were people who had been in the industry for a while. And he said, you who are in this room, always remember that when you get to that place, leave the door open so that others like you can gain access. And I think that's so powerful, because a lot of times we forget where we come from,
Yep.
or we forget the beginning of the journey because we're so caught up with where we are. So that's massive. So I just wanted to pause and say thank you.
Oh, it's my
Now going
pleasure.
back to tough questions. Oh, sorry.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. So kind of going forward, I was looking at your Instagram, and you mentioned, just randomly seeing a spot on your nose and then discovering that it was something more. Bring me back to that moment, and perhaps bring me back to how you felt at that point, because I think there are so many people right now who are getting those diagnoses. I just learned on the weekend that somebody who I went to university with, young girl, probably about 38, she's got a daughter who's about 10, same age almost as my son, and she unfortunately passed because she had cancer.
Oh, good.
And yeah, it's just it's and for me, I felt at that point a sense of guilt, to be honest, just this sense of guilt, because life goes on, and relationships that meant a lot to you perhaps earlier on, you don't spend the time to nurture them.
Yeah.
But that being said, there've been so many advancements in medicine, and a lot of times we don't pay attention to the little things that could make a difference to the outcome of our situation. How did you feel at that point, though, when you discovered that little spot could have been or was so much more?
Well, and this it's a good like fable of not giving up if you feel like something's right and not right, and keep asking the questions, because I had I had two doctor's appointments, and they told me both times that it was just a cyst. Don't worry, it'll go. Just change your skincare routine. So it's two GP appointments. Told me it was just a cyst, and then so I thought, okay, well let's try and confirm this. I'll go to the like a skin clinic in like a central London skin clinic. So I spoke to a specialist, and she said it was just a cyst. So go and get some cortisone stuff and rub that on your nose. It's just a steroid that should kind of help it ease out and all that kind of thing. I was like, it's weird. And it didn't go away. It was staying there for ages, and I was like, do you know what? This doesn't feel like that's what it is. So I went for, but I knew this is probably going back to my brain working overtime. I am a bit of like a hypochondriac, and if I like to have an answer to something. I want to know what it is, and I think probably because I guess with this line of work, I can't go on air if I've got baggage of worry about things in the background. I need to have an answer so I know what I'm dealing with. So a final throw of the dice. I booked a local private appointment at a private hospital in Essex to speak to their skin specialist. And as soon as I sat down, he went, "Oh, right, so you got a little skin cancer there." And he said, "No, it's skin cancer. It's definitely skin cancer." So straight, and I was just like absolutely, I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it. And I was like,
wow.
If I'd have been, because sometimes I think some people are like, well, I've had one answer from the doctors. They know I'm not gonna bother anymore now about it. That's it. The doctors said it's not skin cancer.
Yeah.
Fine. So if I hadn't have kept pushing, bearing in mind that's two GPs, one skin specialist, and then finally in a hospital. That's 5 appointments before they told me what it was, and then I was booked in to have it, it taken out like the week after. But it was I was so stressful. I feel like during that entire period, it was really like I had a really bad back. I feel like it was like, when you get stressed, your other parts of your body start to kind of close down a little bit. So yeah, it was hugely stressful, and it just shows. I don't know. I feel like it was a bit of an example of how sometimes now, and I know the NHS is doing the best that it can. Sometimes you need that extra kind of push to get clarity on things where they just want to ease you off the list so that you're not worrying them or bothering them or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it says something greater to me as well, because a lot of times we defer to the experts, and it could be experts in anything.
Yeah.
It could be, your daughter's having a chat with you and you're saying, nope. And because you're daddy, they think, I'm not going to challenge. But there's something about challenging and really standing up for what you think is right and listening to your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would urge anyone, if you've got even if you've been told by a GP or a nurse or whatever that it's fine, and if you feel in your heart that I don't know, I still feel there's something in this that it might not be right and I need checking out, I'd urge you to just keep pushing on it, because why have something terrible happen to you just because you didn't like to make a fuss, so keep asking the question. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And that's really big of you to share that on social media, because a lot of times people only share the highlight reels, the glossy bits of their life, but they don't really share the not so great bits.
No, yeah,
How do you yeah.
I think it's important to
How
have,
do
but
you,
it's actually
yeah.
both sides of life,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm conscious of time, and you've been so gracious to give me this bit of your time. So I wanted to ask you a couple of final questions. And you see, I've got notes here and I totally went off rail. I'm wondering, what have I forgotten? Oh, yes. You interact a lot with the audience.
Yeah.
What's your most memorable call-in that you've had?
Oh, we've had some incredible calls over the years. I mean, that's one of the things we pride ourselves on hometime, and that you just get these mad people phoning in. But it's good because they trust us. I feel like we get this kind of trust with the audience, and they feel that they know us personally. That's why they'll phone up and talk about. We've had a guy that phoned us from the bath the other day that was kind of crazy.
Oh my days!
We had a guy on last night. Yeah, I don't want to think about that too much.
Oh, we know you're very imaginative, so that's...
Yeah, don't imagine that. Whatever you do, don't imagine it. We had a guy phone in last night because we're putting together a new radio station called Absolute Radio Calm, which is an idea I had about coming up with a radio station that was just filled with sounds around the world to help people be calm for Mental Health Awareness Week in May. And a guy phoned. It's been really interesting to get people's suggestions as to what sound in their life keeps them calm. And this guy phoned in last night, and the most calming sound for him is the sound of a boiler system being drained. And he was just describing it in all this kind of like incredible detail. But, for him, it's like
that's what's calming. Oh, that's brilliant. And for the mental health Absolute Calm, is it going to be just a moment in time for Mental Health Awareness Month, or is it something that will be ongoing?
It'll be ongoing. So I think it will be... I think it's free. At launch, it's going to be just one of the digital stations, so you can just listen to it. And we've got everything from the best thing is these have been recorded around the country based on listener suggestions. So we've got, a beach walk in Brighton, the sound of the trees rustling in Sussex, the waves in Southsea, a laundrette. In central London, the interior of a laundrette making a rumbling noise. Piglets. Some guys suggested that they're pet pigs. They've got 5 pigs, and they make a really lovely snuffling noise when they're eating, and it is really relaxing. So it's this incredible kind of composite of different calming sounds suggested by our listeners, which is cool.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening in based in the UK, be sure to check out Absolute Calm. And then my penultimate question, because as I said, we're gonna squeeze it for dear life. What's your most memorable interview that you've done? Because you've done a lot of lots of big names as well. What's your most memorable interview?
My most memorable interview would definitely be getting to chat to Blur when they reformed. So it was the whole band in the studio, and it was just me with them. And I've been a Blur fan for ages. And also it was a good challenge because I'd heard that Damon Albarn can be kind of a tricky customer to interview, I think, a little bit. So, but I feel like, I had a chance.
You used your spidey senses.
But here's the thing. So things have changed. I used to put myself into a lot of junket situations, where you go and interview people at a hotel. As part of a press day, and those are really interesting psychological battles, because they want you to be a bit of a mess by the time you get to speak to the star, because you'll sit there in a waiting room.
Oh no! It's a psychological warfare. It feels like
it is. So what's good about it now is that because Bauer is so big, the stars will come to the radio station, and then we have a day where they'll go to all the different shows, so you can make them a cup of tea and have a bit of chat before you start with them. So, and that was what we did with Blur. They were great. Idris Elba, he co-hosted the breakfast show with me one morning. That was great. He's such a lovely guy, and that was really nice, because I got virtually chucked out of an interview with him. I asked him whether he would be the new James Bond, and I didn't realise allowed to ask him that. So
I'm still waiting on him to be the next James Bond, by the
it'd be
way.
brilliant.
That didn't happen. Yeah,
But
I'd love to see that.
it'd be great. It'd be great. But it was just nice to. I mean, this is the other thing. So many times, if you have like the bad vibe around certain famous people, a lot of that is the people that they surround themselves with.
Yes,
It's not the people themselves. It's just the kind of like entourage that feel that they need to kind of poke their heads in and ask these questions or say stuff like that. So a lot of the times the people themselves are okay. It's the people that surround them that are the trouble. But me, Blur by a country mile is my favorite interview.
and kind of a final question. You have Raja is perhaps either the thing that makes up every radio presenter's nightmare or dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're featured, that's brilliant. You have been #1 commercial radio drive time show, which is phenomenal.
Thank you.
That is phenomenal. And you don't skate over achievements like that. It's you being recognized for all the hard work that you've done and all the grind that got you here. What's your process? And if you've got to give anybody advice who wants to get to that #1 spot, in whatever area it is, what would you say to them?
Well, I have approached national radio in exactly the same way as I approached regional and local radio. And regional and local radio is like an election. So you basically are going out kissing babies,
campaigning,
getting photographs taken, and we were absolutely relentless in Bristol. We'd go and do a school talk every week to make sure we were in the community. We'd go and do Christmas lights turn-ons. We'd go out and about all the time. And what you'll find with people in national radio, quite a lot of the people in this building that I work with have never met any listeners. They don't meet listeners. They don't go anywhere near listeners. Whereas I'm very used to interacting with people and being out there and doing stuff just because I've been in commercial radio in a regional and local sense. So I approach the war to be #1 in national radio. It's exactly the same way. You've got to be it's a relentless conversation with your audience, and that means it has to be persistent. You can't just be on between 4 and 7, then you're off again. You have to talk to them all the time and always be. And you give up a big part of your life, because I'll chat back to listeners on Twitter and text and stuff right the way through the evening and in the morning, and I'll bring them into my lives and into my life and everything. And I think you have to be willing, and not everyone is willing to do this, and that's completely fine. But you have to be willing to be on with your audience 24/7, and that's the thing that's going to make them solidify that bond with you over a different radio station.
And you know what? I don't think that's dissimilar to anything else. I think you've got to put in the work. You've got to get to know your stakeholders. You've got to be visible, and they've got to feel as though you're somebody that they can relate to and that they know who you are. So just a little bit of advice, whether it is in business or if you, like Andy, are in radio. You know what, Andy? It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Is there anything that you wanted to share that I didn't touch on? I have so many questions that I didn't get to ask, but I'm sure there'll be another time. I'll invite you back.
I would love that. No, and you're a fantastic interviewer. Very, very eloquent, brilliant interview. So it's been a real honour. There's loads of people who do interviews and they're not very good, and your interviewing skills are fantastic. So it's been a real honour to be part of the podcast. So thank you very much for having me on.
And how do people find you if they want to connect with you after today? How do they get in touch with you or follow your story or follow your continuous journey?
So on X or Twitter or whatever they call it, X is at Bush on the radio, Andy Bush Radio on Instagram, or come and check us out. I do, home time between 4 and 7 on Absolute Radio, and then I do the indie disco on Saturday nights between 5 and 7. So busy. I'm always there. I'm always there if you need me. Put it that way.
Andy, you just defaulted to your radio voice when you started saying where we could find you. Did you realise?
7, drop me a text right now, 81215.
I love it. Thank you so very much. It was an absolute pleasure, Andy.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been brilliant to talk to you.